Hey guys, this is Bart coming to you from TST Industries in Florida with another episode of TST Garage. In the shop with me today is a brand new GSX-8S, and I have some glorious news for you guys. This farmland tilling device that Suzuki attached to the back of this bike will be coming off, and we'll be replacing it with a proper Fender Eliminator and lighting package from TST Industries. I want to give credit to Suzuki because they did an incredible job designing and styling this motorcycle. I believe that this whole rear section was just a play in, you guys are going to mod this bike anyway, so let's make the back end design as congruent with the rest of the design as possible, and we'll let the customers style it how they want to. Now, in the aftermarket sector, companies like ours will be responsible for kicking out the products that accomplish those mods. So here we are on the table. I have several different kits that I will present to you. We will be building some of these components into chunks and then installing on this bike. We'll go through what each one does. Before we do that, I do want to explain how we approach the design here at TST Industries. We kind of take our cues from how we used to play with Lego back when we were kids, and we design everything to be sort of a sub-block or sub-assembly that is able to be configured by you, the customer, into a custom kit that you prefer. So this is why we have so many different kits here on the table. I will show you how each one interacts with the other. And then on our website, tstindustries.com, you'll be able to get more information on how that works and which kit works with what. And then if you have any further questions, you can reach out to our customer service and they'll be able to help you with making that selection also. In an effort to stay organized in my explanation, I will start with the base component that builds out all of the kits, and we'll go up the line with how all the other components or sub-assemblies mount onto that. What you see here is the base component. It is what we call a closeout. When you remove your OEM fender, there's a giant hole left behind, and what we do here at TST is we'll design a closeout that fits into that gap, and it follows the body lines of the motorcycle. It mounts in there without any modification. It closes out all of the voids and holes so that grime, debris, and water do not get in there or in your trunk compartment. And it also provides a base for our brackets that mount the license plate and lighting, and that entire assembly then becomes your fender eliminator. You remove your fender, you remount all these things, and now you've eliminated the fender and you have all the replacement parts that are required after the removal of that fender. Like I said, this does not require any modifications to the bike. All the hardware is included, and then you will need to make a choice whether you want the standard fender eliminator or the adjustable. There are some key differences here. This is a very simple static system. It is made of stainless steel, powder coated black so that it disappears behind your license plate, all the hardware included again. This will have great longevity. It is very minimal, very lightweight, but it does not adjust your license plate hanging angle. Here with the adjustable version, it is a collection of subcomponents that I will show you how to build. It's made of 6061 billet aluminum, anodized black. The face of the bracket is brushed very nicely. It is a very high-tech looking component, and then it also enables you to adjust the hanging angle of your license plate to your liking. Now there is a limit to that. Obviously you don't want to hang it vertically. The suspension travel will hit your license plate. We'll get into that after we build it and install it. Now, after the mounting of these brackets onto the base, the rest of the installation is exactly the same. So I will demonstrate how to do each one, but we'll only install one on the bike because those steps are redundant. Now, we've ditched the fender. We now have a means of mounting our license plate. What do we do about the lighting? All the lighting on this particular motorcycle is on the fender. Your tail light, your brake light, your signals, your license plate light. All of that goes away. Well, we do have a license plate light. If you are going to run a license plate light and you want to go with ours, I will show you how to route it and connect it. If you have some other preference, that's cool too. We don't include these by default because, again, we think modular. If you want a license plate light from us, drop it in your cart, and it will be delivered. Now, the taillight and signals also come off. What do? At this point in time, we do offer the Quadrix-D lamps. These are dual color lamps. They have bullet connectors on one side, and they come with a vehicle specific harness for this particular bike. They take all these bullet connections and then terminate in the OEM signal and main taillight connection on the other side. You may ask why we didn't wire them with the OEM connectors already included. This is because we want to pass through the closeout with the minimum amount of penetration space so that we don't create a giant hole that we're trying to close out with a closeout. So I'll show you how to perform that installation. We will need to mount these lamps onto our bracket, this one or this one. So we do have our pod signal mounting kit that is included in the Quadrix-D set for this particular bike. What we also include are these bases for the lamps. You will need to choose the color of your liking for the ring. It does provide a very nice accent. We do have several different colors. The main objective here is to make this chunk and all of these components look like this, very pleasing, and then mount them to the bracket and then move on. Now, if you don't like the standard hardware that comes with our pod signal mounting kit and you want to match some of these components, we do have a separate set of license plate hanging hardware that does have anodized rings. It does match this anodizing, so that's an extra accent that you may opt for, but you don't have to, so that's up to you. So our Quadrix-D lamps here have standard brake function and sequential signal function, which means the brake will go on and off as you press your brake, and the signaling will be from inboard to outboard in a sequence pattern. Now, if you do want a brake alert function, we do already have a video showing how to install our brake light modulator. That is a separate kit, but it is plug and play, just plugs in series with the lamps and the harness here. We do have that captured in a different video, so please look for that on our YouTube channel or tstindustries.com within the product page. One more thing before we start wrenching. Here I have a LED flasher relay. Anytime you move away from using the OEM signals on most bikes and replace them with aftermarket signals, you may encounter some issues with your signal rate. Now, on this particular bike, it goes up and flashes faster. It may or may not trip you up. You may be okay with the faster flash rate. Now, if it's too fast, the sequence in the sequential signal will not complete and you will not get all 4 light fields to turn on. So please consider that. If you do need to purchase one of these, we do have plenty in stock at all times. You can drop that in with the other purchase and that will be delivered at the same time. We have a video showing you how to install that component on this bike. It has a dedicated installation with all the steps explained, so no worries. All right, I'm gonna stop yapping here. I'm really amped to start wrenching on this thing and show you just how easy it is to build this and configure it on the bike. In step 1, we will be removing the license plate off the bike, followed by the removal of the passenger seat. At this point, we will be removing these 3 push pins, one here, and on the opposite side here. Pressing the tops. We'll unlock them. I like to reset them to this position, make them ready for reinsertion. Now we get to this fastener here. It is a Phillips head plastic screw. We'll back that off, take it out. Okay, now the tail end of this plastic shroud is free to move around. Now, it would be a little easier for me to show you guys what's going on in here if I removed a bunch of components and took this out completely, but we'll just have to make do with flexing it back. This is the minimally invasive procedure that I've developed here. Now we have the 3 wire looms coming out of the fender package here. They go under this boot. The boot can actually be pushed down. That will expose the 3 connectors we need to take apart. This big main 3-position Sumitomo one. Press down on the tab. My fingers are kind of large, so I usually use a screwdriver to press down on this. That unlocks it, and I'm able to withdraw it. And then we have these JST 2-position connectors. They have this tab that you press here. That unlocks the ratcheting piece from the window. This I do like to do by hand. I'll just squeeze that tab down with my nail, and that's enough to dislodge it. Now, I need to unroute these guys here to make sure that they will not snag anything on the way out. Now at this point, we hop down to the bottom and remove 4 fasteners from there. All right, down below, let's identify the 4 fasteners that need to come out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those require an 8mm socket. This steel piece will come off when these are removed. And then the rest of this assembly is held in via tabs that have ratcheting clips, so it will retain itself. So now the fender is loose. We'll need to push down on it and have it make a snapping sound and come off. So as these clips clear out of their windows, the whole assembly goes down, and then we pull it towards the rear. I'm going to have to guide the wires and connectors through the top. Now all of this is out, we put that to the side, and you'll notice with the closeout superimposed, this whole area is super clean. And that's what this part was manufactured for. We're at the point where we'll need to build our assembly into a chunk that then will be transferring onto the bike. Again, like I mentioned in the intro, this is our base component, and then we will need to configure either the standard or the adjustable on it. We're gonna start with standard because that's a little bit easier. I'm gonna move the installation hardware for this chunk onto the bike off to the side. And now, before we move on to the installation of the bracket on here, we'll need to consider what we are passing through the closeout to the inside. In this video, I will be showing how to pass 2 lamps for signaling and brake light, as well as our license plate light. So the bulk of the wires will be 2 times this plus 1 times this. For that purpose, we will need to drill a hole in the closeout. That will be done with a 5/16 drill bit. What I have here is a step drilling 5/16. That's a really nice DeWalt tool. We did provide a drill center here, so that'll be easy for us. Now, I know some people will wonder why we didn't just provide this with a hole through it. Well, the answer is twofold. One of the sets that we build with the closeout is just a closeout set. Some people, when they go to the track, they just want to close out the hole left behind by the fender, and they'll throw this on. This receives 2 push pins, and then nothing else gets done to it. It is just a closeout and makes a smooth undertail. I know some other guys will figure out some swing arm mounted license plate bracket or undertail license plate bracket, and they will just want a closeout set. So we do offer that, and for that purpose, we need to make these without the hole. The hole size is also up to you. Now, if you are going with a low mount bracket or some other bracket that will just need a license plate light passing through here, then you won't need a giant hole for it. You could get away with maybe like a 3/16 or 1/8 inch hole just to pass 1 wire. This keeps these assemblies flexible and enables you to make just the size of hole that you need, or not a hole at all. All right, let's drill this thing. Like I mentioned, there is a drill center here. Obviously, I don't want to put any body parts behind it. I have my safety glasses on. I will drill right through. The smaller part of the drill center will serve as the bite in point. I'm not pressing the trigger because my hand's behind there still. I'll bite in. All right, after making that initial bite, I'm gonna bring in my drill backer. I've covered my piece of wood with some tape so that I don't harm the surface of our closeout. Now I've cut the hole into my closeout, and I can either use a deburr bit or utility knife to just get rid of little curls left behind in the material from drilling. That looks good. So now we can go ahead and mount our license plate bracket on here. The TST will go upright like this. This will mount into the bike like I showed right after the removal of the fender. So our Fender Eliminator bracket will mount to these holes here. This is done via the screws provided. We'll drop a washer onto the screw, get the bracket mated onto here, line the holes, washer on top of that connection. And here we have nylock locking nuts. These have a locking element on the threads, so we do not need to worry about thread locking compound or anything like that. We will tighten this connection down with a 4mm Allen from the bottom side and a 10mm open-ended or box wrench or socket from the top side. I get these down to the bottom and back off by just a little bit. That will provide me with enough adjustability so that I can adjust my bracket position just before tightening it down all the way. All right. So this bracket still has the ability to move side to side. The mounting positions are slotted. It can also move off center plane. So what we'll need to do, I actually have it tightened down a little bit too much. We need to position it to our liking. And you just do this by eye. And what helps me get it positioned center is just centering the slots. And then I'll just push it towards the rear. This cutout is the rear. Once I push it in that direction and have it center, I can lock it down and this is good to go. And then we'll transfer it onto the bike using this hardware. Now, all the steps past this point, including the lamp mounting, license plate light mounting, is all the same as when we are building this adjustable setup. So what I'll do is just demonstrate everything with this, and then you guys can choose which one of these you're building, and the steps will be pretty transparent for all of them. So for this assembly, this chunk shows up to you in this form. All the parts are separate. I will now show you how to construct it into the form I showed you before in the intro. These are our hinge bosses. They do have little protrusions, little bosses coming out from them. They locate with the larger hole on the L bracket like so, and that creates the hinge. Now the hinge itself, the hinge boss, has a straight edge and a curved edge. The curved edge goes towards the rear of the bike, so it will be aligned with this cutout section. I place it down on the flat with the curved up. I will now couple up my L brackets like shown here. As you can see, they are not bent on a line 90 degrees to this edge. They are sloped. They are supposed to slope down towards the rear of the bike. So we do need to orient them with that slope in this fashion. They will lock in with the boss. We place a washer and the M6 by 12 screw in that. We start the thread, and now I would like to add a little thread locking agent. Now, for the purpose of this assembly working with our polymer undertail closeout, we do need a plastic safe thread locking method. VC3 is a Vibratite product. This is something that we've been using for many, many years and does not degrade the plastic. The problem with regular store-bought anaerobic thread locking agents is that they off-gas some kind of a chemical that then gets into the plastic pieces and degrades them. So that not only breaks your parts, it voids your warranty. So please do not use a regular thread locking agent. Make sure you use Vibratite or some other plastic safe version. I'm gonna get this to the bottom, back it off just a little bit, leave some adjustability in the system, repeat the steps on this side. I'll just reiterate this. It is very important to seat the larger hole of the L bracket onto the hinge before you start tightening down. Here I'm using a 4mm Allen to make this connection. Now at this point we are temporarily done with thread locking agent. Now we do have 3 separate mounting holes here. For this particular instance, we will be using the innermost holes for these countersunk screws. That connection will receive the nylock nut from the other side of the L bracket. For this fastener pair, we will be using an 8mm box or open-ended wrench on the nut and 3mm Allen from the outside. I again leave some adjustability here and then repeat the steps. All right, so now we have this chunk built. It's ready to be installed on our closeout. We have our closeout in view. Obviously, the cosmetic surface faces the tire, and now you have the TST Industries inscription here that needs to be upright and curved faces of your hinge bosses to the top. Now we'll just use the hardware provided with the adjustable kit to mate these together. Again, we want to use a plastic safe thread locking agent like Vibratite on this connection. If you do not apply thread locking agent to this connection, there's a very good chance that this may vibrate out on you as you ride, and you will lose your setup, lose your license plate. That'll provide bigger problems. I want to solve that ahead of time by just a simple addition of this agent. Screw through washer, through closeout hole, and into the hinge boss. 4mm Allen, and repeat. Down to the bottom, back off a couple degrees, make this adjustable. We'll grab a 10mm open-ended wrench. That's how we will hold our hinge bosses here. What we need to do is align them in a way that they are parallel to each other and also to the center plane of the closeout and therefore the bike. This will provide us nice smooth hinge action. If they are not aligned, the hinge action of this system will not actually work properly. All right, now after we line these guys and make sure that they satisfy the condition that I described, we tighten them down all the way and that's good to go. Now, if the hinge is not moving on you, you could loosen the hinge bolts and make it move again. For now, I'm just gonna have it tightened down slightly so that we don't have a sloppy setup. Next, we'll need to mount our lamps to this setup. Obviously, we are going for the Quadrix-D lamp set on here. If you are using a different type of lighting, not from us, you can go ahead and mount this now. The steps for the mounting will be provided in just a little bit. We'll just depict them with our lamps. All right, so we have 2 of these lamps ready to go. They are identical from side to side, so no big deal there. Let's grab these washers and nuts and take them off. Now, we did want to go ahead and use a very small stud here so that it's not big and obtrusive, which means passing 4 of these connectors through here is a little bit challenging, but if you take your time, go one by one. So the color that we went with is blue because it closely matches the rest of the aesthetics of this bike. We're going to stack the little accepting washer for the pod signal into that ring and then get those guys through onto the wires. Obviously the little recess pocket counter bore should be towards the signal stud. Now as you advance that onto the signal, you'll notice that you have to get this over the threads, and then it becomes this very nice base for this lamp to rest on. I'm going to repeat the steps on the other lamp. Now I'm going to bring into view the pod signal mounting kit we have here. Empty the contents. Each L bracket and hardware set is responsible for mounting our signals to the back side of our license plate bracket, so they look like this. The slotted side goes towards the back of this bracket. The round hole goes towards the signal lamp. You have a series of washers. On this particular connection, we're only going to use 2 washers per side, one from the outside, one from the inside. The extra 2 are redundant. They're used in a different type of configuration and will not be necessary here. This screw goes through this washer. We mount the license plate here, and this goes on the back side, and this caps off the connection. If you want to grab some of these guys here, we do offer these as a separate kit. Actually looks a little nicer, and it fits with the scheme of this bike and what we're doing with the aftermarket accessories. So I'm actually going to use these just so you guys know this is a separate kit. So if you want that, you will need to drop that in your cart. This will replace all of this hardware, and it's pretty much the same scheme. They're just slightly different components. Before I mount all this together, I like to mount my lamp onto the individual L brackets first. That just makes for less components to fiddle with. It's important to get this L bracket on in this configuration. Obviously, we want this to mount under the bracket here and not in front of the lamp lens. So make sure that it's in this configuration before you start dropping the other components on. Next, we get the washer and nut on here. Just gonna hand tighten it for now. Still provides a little bit of adjustability. Once this is on here and then on the bike, we will perform the final adjustment and tightening. I'm going to repeat the steps here. This is a good time to introduce the license plate itself. We'll need that so that we avoid more steps later. Grab our hardware. If you are using the hardware that came with the pod signal mounting kit, it will require a 10mm open-ended or box and a 4mm Allen. On this particular cosmetic upgrade, we are going to be using a 3mm Allen from the outside and an 8mm box from the inside. Kind of just getting it on haphazardly. I'm not leveling anything or centering anything just yet because that will get final adjustments when it's on the bike. All right, now it's sturdy enough to get onto the bike, and we'll mount this whole chunk using the hardware provided here in the closeout kit, and then we'll go through all of the actual adjustments. If on your setup you have opted to run our license plate light, I will now show you the steps on how to include that in there. Basically, before this comes together, you can get your license plate light under the license plate itself, or I find it actually much easier to have this constructed and just loosen it and get that in there. So that's how I will perform those steps. We will need to route the license plate light over the license plate and out through the middle of the hinge bosses. And now this tab protruding from the license plate light package will need to get slipped under the license plate in between the bracket and the license plate. For that purpose, I will loosen it up a little bit so I could deflect it, make it easy on me. You can opt to strip off the masking from the double stick tape. This is high bond 3M stuff. It's very, very strong, so it's pretty permanent. I typically just clamp them in place, and the pressure from the hardware on the license plate actually holds it for me, but that choice is up to you. No big deal either way. Tighten this back down so I don't have a sloppy mess in my transfer. Give the hinge a little snugging for the same purpose. Now, if you are using the standard Fender Eliminator version, this window here will be where you route your license plate light wire through. Signals, the lamps, the rear lamps still route the same way as this, but the license plate light will go through here and then through to the inside of the bike. All right, now we have this as a chunk. This can be transferred to the bike. I find it much easier to route all of my wires while I'm on the table because, again, I will have to go one by one, especially when I get towards the end there. You can choose to make a bigger hole in here so that this step is easier, but I find that if this is something I have to do one time and it leads to less grime and water penetration and a more cosmetic look, I'm willing to go through the cumbersome exercise of it, and I'll be happier with the end result. And just along the way, I make sure I don't get things tangled and twisted, and that way when I cinch this up and take up the slack, we won't have things looking like braids. We've designed these parts to look as cosmetically pleasing as possible, but the actual end configuration and what it looks like very much depends on how it was all constructed. So a little bit of care needs to be exercised. Now this dual core cable here is flat, so what I like to do is milk out the slack and make sure I don't have it twisted, and then penetrate that to the inside of the closeout. Again, making sure I haven't snagged anything here. All right, that's all looking pretty good. Get my cable shielding stuff through here. And now at this hole size, I have a lot of resistance to motion, which to me is good. I like it to stay put after installation. I don't want it to slip around. I'll be able to position my wires just so that from the side and from the rear, they completely disappear behind all of the components. We want this to look as stealthy as possible and minimal because we are replacing bulk, and the job of this setup is to be as minimal as possible. Now we are ready to go into the bike with the wires, onto the bike from the bottom with this chunk, and get it mounted from the inside using this hardware. Let's get back on the bike. Now we will be putting this chunk up to the undertail here. Let's grab the wires, bundle them up like so, and make use of this routing hole to get the wiring from the bottom to the top. I like to immediately route these to the right side of the motorcycle. That is where they will be connected and live. And now we'll get the bosses here, just have protrusions that line up with the old screw bosses. And then these bosses just sit and sandwich on top of these. Make sure that this fits in there really nicely, and then from up top, we'll start dropping the screws in and fastening this thing in. We will now make use of these two rearmost fender fastening holes to fasten up our new setup to the bike. I will be using the longer screws along with the small black washers to make that connection. It's a little bit difficult to show you guys exactly what I'm doing while I'm doing it, so I will have to perform a step and then explain it and so forth. So I engaged that one over there. Now I have the other little black washer and the longer screw that will be received by the boss superimposed right under this location here. Now I am using Plastite thermoplastic screws going into a plastic boss. This means we have to tighten it just so. The way I like to do this is I start forming the threads with the screw, and I get that to the bottom, and I know it's at the bottom when the piece that's being fastened stops moving. If I try to move it up and down, it no longer has movement. That is where it's fully to the bottom. And then I just give it like a 2 to 3 degree turn to lock it in place, and then I leave it, and then that's it. Now, there will be a need for the larger washer, larger steel washer, and the shorter screw, one each into this boss and then into this boss. There are 2 bosses that will need to be fastened down. This is where our assembly becomes structurally sound. So again, same rules apply for this screw connection. This is a Plastite screw going into thermoplastic. Trying to make it as on axis as possible. Okay, now with the same rules applied, I have bottomed this out. This is ready to go. I did tweak this back quite a bit, but this is polypropylene. It will spring back and we won't have a problem. So now the wiring, I like to place it through this routing exit. That is where the OEM wiring went through. I do also like to go over the diagnostics wire bundle, meaning when this is laid down back into its position here, this wiring goes over. That creates less bulk for me here and nicer routing. Now at this point, sort of don't remember which lamp leads to which of these connector bundles. So you could either push it up and down through the hole and figure that out, or you'll have to do process of elimination, but I think this is a little bit easier. So this is my left, this is my right, license plate light. All right, let's do a little bit of connecting now. Make sure the bike is powered down. We are going to be going with a connector into power source here, and then we have a bunch of these connectors that could potentially become hot if the bike's on. Touch them together short. You don't want to do that. Let's plug in the main. There's only one way to do it. You find the locking element, line it up with the key, and boom, done. And then these connectors are pretty arbitrary. We will have to figure out which one leads to what. So now we have our main connector and the signal connectors plugged in. These are our outputs here. You will notice that blue, yellow, and black have double females, which means those must be the main functions of the taillight. And yes, black is ground, blue is running, yellow is brake. We are completely color-coded here, so there's no need to figure anything out here at this point just yet. Both sides of blue go into the blue connector. Push it in until you accomplish locking. Then we could slip the insulation piece over and have it somewhat covered. We will be locking this down with electrical tape because this can travel and you don't want these connectors to short circuit. But for now, let's get these guys situated. A tip here is you will have an easier time performing these connections if you have the crimped sections facing the same way. If you have them off by some degrees, they will not want to fit together very much. So crimp face, crimp face. Break. Okay, so we have our main functions plugged in, and then we have the signal still disconnected. While holding my signal connections to the harness away from any electrical component, I'm going to power up the bike and I'm going to test the main functions. So you can see we have running light and we have brake light. So now I'm going to power up the right signal and test which one of these connections controls that. Okay. So I've found the combination that will make the right signal flash. Now I do want to make an important note here. I already have one of our TST Industries Gen 2 flasher relays installed on this bike, and that is controlling the flash rate for us. I know that with the OEM relay, there is a high likelihood of having problems with the flash rate. I know with this particular setup where we have Quadrix in the front and Quadrix in the rear, the OEM relay does not flash the signals at all. So if that's your predicament, please change the relay first and then go to test these components. Left and right is working properly. So our electrical connection is done here. I'm going to go ahead and insulate my signal connections now. Signal and main taillight connections. Like I said, these things can slip off very easily. The bike vibrates quite a bit when you ride it, so we want to make sure that these are locked down. First get all of the individual connections locked with tape, and then I do a final roll around the whole bundle. If this system ever needs to be taken off and you're taking it off with the entire chunk, that's pretty easy. It's plug and play. If you ever need to take it off, if you ever need to take the lights off by themselves, also pretty simple because all you're doing is removing tape that is replaceable. And so being very careful not to leave any exposed conductors, I got all of my insulating caps locked down. Now I'm ready to place that final winding of tape to bundle all this up. I like to use some tension on this so that it becomes nice and neat. For the purpose of easy removal sometime in the future, if I ever need to remove it, I leave a fold over tab here that will help me grab the tape and remove it. Other than that, this is pretty much done. Now we just need to consider what to do about the license plate light. Now on the electrical connections for the fender lighting, the license plate light circuit is part of the main taillight circuit. So at this point, we'll just need to pierce the blue and the black wire in our harness here. We have provided you guys with these posi-tap connectors that make your connection here into the running light circuit. We will go red to blue and black to black. It's fairly simple. You have two caps here, larger diameter, smaller diameter. The larger diameter cap is what connects into the circuit that you're trying to connect into. Pick a spot. I guess you can do it in a less cumbersome fashion, upstream here. These are the two wires we want to tap into. The little channel that is part of this threaded portion here goes around the wire you're trying to tap into, and this part of the connector has a piercing element that pierces the shielding of the wire, goes into the conductor, and provides you with the other side, which then can be removed. This little cap is very small, so make sure you hold on to it. If you drop it and it goes away, it's kind of a pain to find it. You can either shorten this wire or bundle it up and scrunch it in there in that boot. That's what I'll choose to do because it's vastly easier. Get our exposed conductor from our license plate light wire, feed it through the non-threaded portion of this cap, have the conductor protrude from the threaded part, and then get it threaded up into the portion we already did in the prior step. As you tighten this down, it will exert pressure between the surfaces there. Give it a little tug test. This is good to go. I'm going to repeat this process on the black wire. So now all connections are made. They're insulated. Let's give it a test. All right, we have license plate light function. Good to go. From this point forward, it's a matter of routing the wires into where they're going to be stowed because of the excess, and making everything nice and neat, covering our main connections with the boot. The twisty tie that comes on the license plate light wire is reusable, so you just use that to bundle up this bulk here. That'll be a handy way to make it easier to deal with. And we could stow that away up towards the front of the bike like so. Advance the boot up pretty much where it was. That's looking pretty good here. You can go ahead and replace the fasteners that were holding this down on the bike here. I'm going to go with this Phillips first. And then our 3 push pins. Nice and simple. At this point, I'm going to grab the passenger seat, slam it down in its place, then we're going to hop down below, make our adjustments, and be done. All right, here. We still have these guys loose. Everything's kind of not adjusted. So I'm going to start by grabbing a 13mm open-ended wrench and getting my pods parallel with the plane of the ground. So I will want to have our lenses perpendicular to the ground, and then give it a little tighten. We're not going for full tighten yet. Where they are parallel to the ground will also depend on the hanging angle of the adjustable bracket. If you did go with the adjustable one, there will be a need for final adjustment here. I'm actually happy with this hanging angle, but if you're not, you could always loosen the hinge and move this up and down. I do like this angle, so here's where I'm going to lock it down, and we will work from here. I'm going to check again if I just altered my perpendicular to ground lens relationship, and I did not. I got it back to the same place. That's pretty good. All right, I'm going to loosen my license plate connection by just a little bit, allowing me to move this around. Now I like my license plate to be up as far as it'll go, and then centered. And then we obviously need our license plate light to be centered. And then we also have mobility in the L brackets that mount the pods. So I'm going to bring those inboard just a little bit. That's where I like it. I like my colored ring to be basically touching or collinear, cross section of that collinear with the edge of my license plate. And that's my preference. Your installation will follow your preference. Now, as I tighten this down, it is possible for this to fall off axis, fall out of this geometric relationship. So as you tighten, you just have to make sure that you're maintaining the look that you're after, and then tighten down fully here. Get this side to look exactly the same, and tighten down. Everything tight here. Let's go ahead and tighten down on the actual signal stalks. Now these connections do not have a hard stop because we are turning a nut and compressing over an overmolded rubber piece. If you turn that in far enough, you will rip the steel part out of the rubber. So you don't want to do that. What we want to do is turn it in until it presents enough resistance that vibrations won't turn it. And you could test for that by just trying to force turn it a little bit, and if it doesn't, that's it. That's all you want to do. The preload from the rubber being compressed will prevent the nut from coming off during riding vibration, and that's pretty much job done. Let's give it a test. License plate light working. Running light working. Brake function's good. Right signal. Left signal. Fantastic. All right, guys, there you have it. That's pretty much it. In just a couple minutes, we went from this to this. We restored some sexiness to this bike. We removed several pounds, and I think we've done a pretty massive upgrade to the tail end of this bike. I really love the way this looks. I'm pretty biased because I own TST and I take pride in all of the products that we make here. Hopefully you agree. If you do, check out tstindustries.com. We have these parts ready to go. We also have a whole host of other parts for this bike and packages for other bikes you may have in your stable. I want to thank you for watching. I hope to hear from you. I like comments. Please drop them below in the comment feed. I like to discuss things with you guys, so I really hope that you're going to take the time and let me know what you think. All right, that's pretty much it. Thanks again. Ride safe. See you later.